everyone. Welcome to this session called Partnerships for Impact, How Tech Companies Support Education Innovation. I'm Melissa Oldrin. I lead education programs here at Unity. And in my role at Unity, I've had the pleasure of partnering with education organizations across the globe as they innovate their teaching and learning by incorporating Unity into their programs and courses. I've seen students and educators create some amazing work with Unity, solve some tough social problems with Unity tech, and tell dynamic stories using Unity to bring their ideas to life in all new ways. Students, of course, go on to industry jobs where they take things even further. And I really cannot wait to see what the next few years will bring from education and technology alignments. I'm very happy today to introduce my guests who will talk about how their companies support education and innovation. Both lead impactful partnership work at two influential companies that utilize real time 3D in unique and groundbreaking ways. My first guest is Yennie Solheim, Director of Social Impact at Niantic. And my second guest is Monica Arez, Head of Education at Facebook. Thank you both for sitting down with me today to talk about how your companies support education. To kick it off, it would be wonderful to hear more about your roles and how you found your way to your roles at your companies. Yennie, if you wouldn't mind, could you start us off to tell us about your role and how you found your way to this unique position?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you so much for including me. I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation and to listen into the really amazing conversations earlier and after this. So, I'm the Director of Social Impact at Niantic, and I've been at the company about 10 and a half years. And I actually started at the company as our CEO's EA. So, started in administrative work, bounced around into partnerships and marketing. And then in 2017, about a year after we launched Pokemon Go, which most people know, I decided that I really wanted to work with nonprofits. And we had seen some immense impact happening with our players. As I think most people know, you have to move outside in order to play games like Pokemon Go. And when you move outside, a lot of good things happen. And so we were hearing from players from all over the world who had lost weight or explored their community or met their future wives and husbands. And so I pitched the company and I asked them if we could start a social impact team specifically focused on amplifying all of that good that happens when you play and explore outside. And that is how social impact came to be at Niantic. And we are a small but mighty team and continue to just have a ton of fun.
Monica, I'm going to have you also tell us about your role and how you found your way to your role.
Excellent. Now, I actually love this question, and Yennie, I loved hearing your story. I think, we were talking about this earlier today in a meeting that very few people who are in this field right now actually answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, accurately, just because none of this was actually a job way back then. And we all kind of, I think, forged our own paths, even within our current companies, of how it came to be. So I just feel extremely lucky that we get to be the ones laying the foundation for immersive tech and education. And really love hearing how we all brought this together, because I think it helps us move forward collectively too. My background's actually very traditional. I majored in math in college and didn't really pick my first job. Deloitte came to my campus and said, you're going to be an actuary. So I was like, all right, I don't know what an actuary is. Sure, let's try it. And got to move to Manhattan. And, turns out all I had to do was make these mathematical models and turn huge amounts of data into order. And I liked the work, but I didn't actually really feel all that inspired. So there was always something kind of missing within it. Until one day, everything changed. I think it was in my third year there. They asked if we could volunteer in the public schools as part of this corporate outreach program at the time. And mainly I was just excited to escape my cubicle. But, after an afternoon in the school, I loved working with the students, but realized that I felt kind of deflated. There just wasn't a whole lot of learning and teaching going on. So I really thought deeply about what it was that made me curious and engaged in college, and realized it was when we brought technology into the classroom and got to model things in 3D or to add motion. And I think that's what helped me make sense of the world in a way that made me curious for more. So I started to really wonder why we weren't bringing these technologies to areas of education and learning. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I actually just wanted to be part of that solution. So I quit my job and went on to graduate school to learn how to build curriculum and new technologies. And then taught for 10 awesome years, where I just spent way too many hours trying to create lessons that were visually rich and engaging and connected the real world to what we were doing. I really only had 2D surfaces, which felt fairly restrictive. And then eventually people kept telling me, you know, you need to get these lessons in front of more students and into more areas. So I recognized that that was the time to figure out how to use technology to not only transform learning, but then also just to bring access to education at scale. So again, made another career change, made a leap into tech, first at Amazon for a couple of years and then at Facebook. And in my second week of the job at Facebook, I think someone gave me a demo of a VR headset. And the second I put that headset on, I knew it was the medium I'd always been looking for to transform learning. And again, just feel incredibly lucky. I've devoted my career to it ever since, really kind of carving that pathway at Facebook. First in creating immersive content on the Oculus team, later in actually helping train those who want to learn how to become creators and developers through Spark AR Studio. So yeah, excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Amazing journeys, both of you. I'm so glad you found your way to your roles. We're all luckier for it. Now, it's becoming more common these days for tech companies to have a connection to the education sector, but it's often not the first thing you think of when it comes to corporate tech initiatives. Can you tell us a little more about what's happening at your companies when it comes to education? What is your group's mission? What are some program highlights? Maybe even impact that you've seen or you are anticipating to see. Yennie, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I will. We'll just get my slides up here on the screen. Yeah, so to just set the stage a little bit on Niantic itself, like I mentioned, we build games. Pokemon Go is our most well-known one, and this is our mission. We work to inspire people to explore the world together, and that really is, you know, key and crucial to the work that we do. We believe in human connection. We believe that when people come together in the real world, good things happen. So this really drives us. And this is a look at how our company is structured. So we've got our Lightship platform that is kind of the fundamental AR technology that helps power games like Pokemon Go and Ingress, and also is a jumping off point for AR developers and creators who want to create specific AR applications kind of across a range of industries and applications in the real world. And then this is really what kind of stops us in our tracks at the company. It's a little bit of a shocking fact that less than 25% of children participate in the recommended 60 minutes of physical activity per day. I am sure I speak for everyone who has children or is connected to children that movement is key, and it's going to impact how generations evolve and engage in communities for years and years to come. So we really think about this when we think about creating our underlying AR technology as well as our educational programs. So these are the categories that we focus on when we think about our social impact initiatives, specifically focused on education. And I'll just walk through them real quickly. So the first is amplification, and that's really utilizing the existing technology and resources that we have at the company to help fuel learning at schools. We partner with nonprofits. A good example is TechRow, who specifically focuses on teaching AR skills to underserved communities. They started in New York and now have become virtual as well and are accessible all across the country. It's really amazing to see work like the work that TechRow does help impact the overall learning sphere of these youth that they're serving. And what we really believe in is that if we can help support and amplify all of the learning tools and programs at schools, specifically at public schools, that we can hopefully help lift up the generations that are coming up behind us. Another nonprofit that we work with is Code Crew. They're based in Tennessee, and we have a really fun relationship with them and recently experimented with them and TechRow by connecting the two nonprofits. So Code Crew was looking to provide additional AR learning and teaching to their program participants, and TechRow had the virtual learning platform. And so Niantic came in, connected the two, and then funded the programming. And that was really fun for us to see the nonprofits work together. The second category is movement. And movement, of course, for Niantic is really, really crucial and key. And we think that having as much movement as possible in schools, both during the learning periods as well as after school programming, is important. So we've worked with organizations like UNICEF, and Big Heritage, which is a historical learning nonprofit in the UK, to think about creative ways that we can help support and engage students to move more in ways that feel relevant to them and applicable, and help them learn things like mapping, geography, history, and then, of course, just broader physical movement. And then the third way that we focus on education is supporting specific organizations that are helping to bridge the equity divide. We work with the Oakland Public Education Fund here in the Bay Area, and we specifically focus on helping to fund their various initiatives to ensure that every single student that's a part of that public school system has the same equitable access to learning tools, so hardware as well as software, and all of the resources that come with that. And then we've got a really awesome long-term partnership with the National Park Foundation. Their Open Outdoors for Kids program specifically seeks to bring every single fourth grader across the US to a national park, obviously a little bit different because of the pandemic right now. But it's a really amazing program in that it connects youth to the outdoors and remove some of the barriers that keep youth from connecting to the outdoors. So that's it for me, and I will hand it off to Monica.
Excellent, thank you. So at Facebook, we are currently focused on building an ecosystem to support learning in the metaverse. And again, right now, these are very, very early days. So what that means for us is focusing on three main areas. So this includes skilling the next generation of AR/VR creators, and then transforming the way that we actually learn through high quality immersive experiences. And lastly, increasing access to education and to technology. So I was lucky enough to get to Facebook right at the start of our investment in immersive tech for education, which at the time was really just in the content space. So it's kind of fun to see how the evolution has happened. But I started the year, Mark announced that we were investing $10 million to build educational VR apps. And I got to sit with a team over at Oculus to work with developers to bring these experiences to life, and loved everything about those early days of building, as I'm sure those who did the same feel. We were throwing things against the wall just to see what would stick, and we learned so much along the way. I think one of our most surprising findings was the power of empathy building in VR. But then I also really quickly realized as soon as people started using VR, they almost instantly wanted to know how to make things in VR. And of course, we didn't have the tool to build it. So we often sent people over to Unity or Unreal. But it really got me thinking about, pretty soon there are going to be a lot of jobs in the AR VR space, and there's not a lot of talent to fulfill them. So most universities and schools aren't quite teaching these skills yet. And so I started to feel that as a company, if we're creating this hardware and platforms with cutting edge technology, that we also had a responsibility to teach it. Or, at least until education kind of caught up and was able to integrate some of these skills into their curriculum. So this led me over to the Spark AR team because we actually had a tool to build AR called Spark AR Studio. And after gathering a couple of cross-functional players, and then of course some external creators, we almost always want to build everything through partners and our creators and developers. We were able to collaborate to figure out what it was people needed to learn AR and then the best way to teach it. So in January of last year, we launched the Spark AR curriculum, which is our first formalized way to learn AR through Spark. And for those of you that don't know, Spark AR is really just used to create AR on Facebook and Instagram. I would say most notably, probably to create Instagram face filters, but also like the try before you buy that you see with the glasses and the hats, placing objects in your actual space to see what it looks like, and any world AR, which is really just placing 3D objects and animations in your real world. What we built is really just a foundational level course, but we're in the process of building out additional offerings to reach a much broader range of learners. And I think one thing I'm especially excited about is AR's ability to combine creativity and tech. And so to be successful in this medium, you actually really need both, which is why I'm especially proud of the fact that more than half of our creators on the platform are female right now. And this is really the first time it's happened in a tech medium. So it's really my goal to continue this trend and to make sure that we're skilling learners across the globe to really ensure that diversity and economic opportunity are available through this technology. Also, as a company, we have spent the last few years dedicated to building excellent hardware and seeding the ecosystem with high quality content, but mainly for our early adopters. So this has been primarily in the gaming space and the entertainment space. And part of my focus now is actually twofold moving forward. So it's to make this technology more accessible. Obviously, we need to get hardware into schools and universities and nonprofits and museums so that people can start to integrate the technology into the learning environment. And hopefully make it integral into the way that we connect and build and learn. But two, I believe strongly that immersive environments and experiences can truly transform the way we train and build empathy and learn. So we actually need to build more experiences and high quality content. And as much as I keep thinking, like as much as I hate the pandemic, I believe it really has accelerated solutions in the learning space, and that the metaverse will help us get to this next level of learning. So historically, if you think about it, learning's mainly been in person, and then the pandemic introduced us to this global hybrid model with some in-person instruction, but mainly web-based learning. And as we build out the metaverse and move into the future, I really think that we'll go into this kind of tribrid model, as I'm calling it, but where we'll have some in person, some online, and then this third component, which will be immersive. And this will help us learn in simulated environments or explore through increased visualizations or just transport ourselves to the best instructors and classes in the world. You know, at the most basic level, even during the pandemic, we ended up sending out hardware to some of the university classes who could no longer join together and they were spread out around the world. They didn't even consume actual learning content or experiences, but the act of being able to join together in immersive spaces where they could see body language, they could turn their head and nod at each other and make virtual eye contact, that increased learning tenfold because we use so much more of our body language when we actually communicate than we're able to through Zoom. So at the very basic level, even this was a huge value. And of course, the metaverse will also offer us this seamless kind of multimodal approach to learning that will break down walls of museums and schools and homes everywhere and hopefully kind of start to infuse a whole new layer of curiosity and creativity and innovation into learning, which has really been stripped out over the years, and especially now that we've all been kind of learning in isolation. So I think what I'm most excited about, obviously, we get to bring these three things together: skilling creators, building immersive content, and then increasing access to learners everywhere. But of course, we cannot do this alone. I mean, this will take everyone from creators and developers to educators and industry experts to brilliant learners who use this technology in schools, and bring us into the future with new use cases that we can't even fathom right now. So if we really are building the next computing platform, as many companies are talking about, and then I believe education needs to be at its core, and it really will take all of us collaborating to do it successfully.
Thank you both for sharing. I love seeing the range of initiatives here, from Niantic's work with early young learners getting outside, moving all the way through to higher ed and beyond. The opportunities just span quite broadly for all of us. You're both in very influential tech companies and are perhaps in unique positions to see what's coming in the future, well, in terms of future technology. But without giving away any big secrets of what's to come from your companies, can you tell us what innovations do you anticipate will emerge or are perhaps already here that will have a big impact on education within the next decade or so?
I
Any
can go
thoughts, Yennie,
first.
Monica? Yeah.
Yeah. So Monica mentioned it actually in her presentation that as much as we all likely despise the pandemic, it really has helped accelerate some amazing things in education. You know, all of a sudden, students across the country and around the world were locked inside their homes, and it became very clear who needed access to learning tools and programming and hardware. We worked with a lot of school districts who specifically were just looking for funding and access to hotspots and Wi-Fi. And I think that's been a problem for a long time, but it was exacerbated by the pandemic. And so what I'm really excited to see is how quickly we can create more equitable access to various youth, all the way from beginning at kindergarten through 12th grade and into college, and use technology to really raise everyone up to the same level. Learning is something that every single person can do. Everyone is capable of learning. It's just getting the right access to the tools on a continuous basis. So what I'm really excited to see, and I hope that we all step up to the plate and help support, is this ability to access learning through, augmented learning, virtual learning, in-person learning, all of the above, so that everyone has equitable access to these types of tools in education.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Yennie. Monica, what are
I
your
love
thoughts?
all of that. Absolutely agree. And that I think that you're right. Another thing that the pandemic has forced us to take a hard look at and really solve quickly. I think if we look even beyond that, maybe like 5+ years down the road, I think I'm most excited probably about two things. One is the potential of AR glasses. Obviously, we are not there yet. We're nowhere near this yet, but I think there is a world in which AR glasses can help keep more students in school, learning with their peers. I guess in like a discreet and socially acceptable way, right? And so I think back even to, we just released our Ray-Ban stories, which are smart glasses. They don't have AR capabilities yet, but they have speakers in their little arms. And as someone who grew up with hearing challenges, the first thing I thought about when I started wearing them was, my gosh, this could have really helped me hear the teacher better. And so for students with hearing loss or second language learners, the ability to control the volume of the teacher or get real-time translations through, again, these socially acceptable pair of glasses could be game changing. But I think even beyond that, let's imagine when iterations come to market, we start to expand partnerships to include solutions for visually impaired. I think through actual AR glasses, we can work with light and 3D mapping and object and text detection and really help those who are colorblind or who aren't fully served by regular lenses. So I think that's an interesting area for us to think about. Then also, early studies are showing, and I haven't dug into the research quite as much, but I have read a couple of things that AR is actually better at detecting reading and writing disorders than the sort of the way that we do it manually right now. So imagine if we could help students figure out earlier some of the learning differences that they have, like dyslexia, and then use the glasses to actually adapt standard texts and materials in real time for these learners. I think it's just an incredible area. Similarly, with autistic students, sometimes I think if we could combine sort of that AI and facial recognition to help them understand other people's emotions and beyond, practicing certain situations, all these things can start to come in through AR glasses, which again, there are opportunities now to help with some of these, but most of them require taking students out of the classroom or putting on extra headphones or something to help them really get the aid that they need, but it's not seamless. It doesn't really support them discreetly or where they're at. And most importantly, it doesn't leave them with their community of peers, which is where students really need to learn best. So that's something that I think we have an opportunity to really help with accessibility when it comes to this technology. Beyond that, I would say, wearables, once we kind of bring in the biometrics, then that just opens up a whole new world. I think most simple thought about that is really we can start to use those biometrics to help students who maybe are feeling anxious, send small pulses to the glasses to help them regulate breathing, just to kind of, again, remind them ways to help keep them in the learning environment where they're at without needing to leave the classroom. So I think that those are things that we have a tremendous opportunity for. And then second, and probably more immediate, is really this notion of maybe like kind of one-to-one devices for VR learning environments. And so I think it's one thing to bring a VR cart into the classroom twice a month, but it's another for students to keep the tools with them, right? So they can bring them home, use them for multiple different classes. They then have space and time to create and explore. It's like their own little sandbox at home when they might have time to really create, but also connect to their peers, or learning across the world if it makes more sense to them, or they can't get that kind of class in their own school. So I know there's a progression there to adoption, and obviously integration is not a seamless or easy experience, but I see it as probably one of the most valuable shifts that is happening in education. As soon as we kind of get this technology embedded in more of a one-to-one fashion.
Amazing. I'm so excited for what's to come. Now, those of us in education and those of us who work alongside education partners understand that the future belongs to those who prepare for it. The education sector, in partnership with technology, can prepare people to have meaningful and prosperous futures. Yennie, Monica, what should educators, schools, learners, people do now to prepare for this future?
Well, I think part of the conversation, and I'd almost switch it a little bit, is to say, what can corporations like Facebook and Niantic do to help support learning environments, school districts, teachers, and students? And the reason I'm posing it that way is that we are the ones that really fully understand whatever unique technology or product we have at our organization, right? And so if we understand that with clarity, then we should also be committing some of our time and resources to helping to share that with some of the school districts. So I'll give you an example. We have found that just utilizing any one of our games to help encourage youth to move during their physical education classes is a huge, exciting way for students to move around. We've had a school district in Sweden specifically use Pokemon Go to encourage their students to move around their outdoor space and explore the surrounding forests around them. And that was really brought on by some conversations that we had been having with organizations like them. So I think there's a twofold answer there of organizations like ours need to continue to explain the ways in which our technologies can be applied to education, right? The ways in which teachers and students can kind of grab and go and utilize tech in a way that is meaningful to them. And then also, of course, on the flip side, encouraging school districts and principals and PTA members and teachers to think about the things that they see in the schools and identify the places where they might have holes or places where they feel that their students might be missing out, and then pose that question almost back to the corporations of how can you use your technology at Niantic or at Facebook or Unity to help us bridge this gap. So I think it's an ongoing conversation. It's on all of us to continue to build our networks, not only within the cozy, comfortable networks that we have within tech, but really, broadening our wings and reaching out to people who we might not normally speak to on a regular basis, and then having those regular conversations. So not an answer
Yes.
really, but an answer.
Oh, I love it. And yes, yes, yes to all of it. Thank you. Monica, what are your thoughts?
I agree. It's very much a twofold approach. I think for educational institutions, I would say in this moment, like, be curious. I think embrace seeing learning in the metaverse and what the opportunities are. I think, our education is it's still based largely on the foundation of something that is hundreds of years old. And I always joke that when I was little, if I was curious about something, I would look it up in our one set of encyclopedias. And if I was lucky, there'd be a small paragraph and maybe a picture. They didn't all have pictures, but if they did, it was like a bonus ad. And then today, students search for something on Google and they just get a host of pictures and articles and videos, and they synthesize all this different information in a way that makes sense to them. And I think we're entering a time where there will soon be able to use sort of that immersive tech to transplant themselves there. So imagine you want to learn about something, you can just go visit there, walk around there, overlay information into what you're learning in the real world, or see the invisible, or play with space and time and scale, and all these ways that we didn't have access to that way of learning before. But it's going to take educators and educational institutions to start thinking about how to prepare students for their future. And so I think this includes using the technology to learn, but also how to create with it. And so I guess I'd urge institutions to really think critically about the shortcomings of the past year and a half of online learning. Because obviously there were a lot of challenges, but demand something different rather than slipping back into the old ways. Really figure out how can we use this opportunity to write our path forward. And then I think a couple of additional things we can really leverage the technology for is like treating well-being as an academic mandate. And I think there's, the VR has an incredible capability to really integrate that into how we connect and how we learn. And then I think also that students should just be treated as creators, not just consumers of ed tech, but really from the very beginning, they're also creators of this new medium moving forward. So having educational institutions be able to cater to both of that. But like unlike the early days of immersive tech, we've made this technology pretty easy to use now. And I think the students are already fluent in it. But there was a lot of resistance just because it was difficult to enter and use AR and VR and all those things that early adopters spent the time doing, but it wasn't quite ready for mainstream or educational institutions. And I think we finally passed that bridge of having the tech be easy to use, but the hurdles I think still come from integrating it into learning institutions, right? So we as a company, back to Yennie's point, like we know we have a lot of work to do on our side in terms of like school specific accounts and integrations and mobile device management. And these are all things we're working on. It's kind of as we're stair stepping into different use cases, we're becoming aware of these and solving for them. But we also need schools to help us understand what it is that they need so that we can build solutions together moving forward. I think this movement into that next computing platform doesn't belong to just one company. It's really going to take all of us to make sure that we're building and innovating responsibly. So educators, thought leaders, educational institutions, they all have a huge seat at this table right now.
Absolutely. Thank you. Wonderful. I couldn't agree more. Partnerships between tech, between the education sector, between nonprofits, between government agencies, we all need to continue to work together and make sure that the students of today have opportunities for the future. It's a really exciting time to be in education, to see the potential and to kind of feel the momentum and the move towards more mainstream acceptance of some of these technologies for teaching and learning purposes. Thank you so much. What are some ways that people can get involved with your programs and offerings? Would you mind posting any links to more information in the chat here and let us know? How can folks get involved?
Yeah, for Niantic, I will post these in the chat if they haven't already been posted. But really, our social impact webpage on nianticlabs.com/social impact is the best place to kind of get a quick snapshot of the types of work we do. There's a form you can fill out if you're interested in working alongside us. But you can also just email me directly. I am an open book. I love talking to people. My email is yennie@nianticlabs.com, and I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you, Yennie.
Awesome. We have a couple. I will post these as well. Links to, we have the Spark AR curriculum, which learners can go on and learn the skills to create an AR. We have Facebook for Education site to find tools and programs and resources to help build inclusive and innovative learning communities. And we also have, again, a content library full of incredible immersive experiences through the Oculus library or App Lab. Again, not all of it's learning content, but you can kind of do some cool searches and figure out what experiences make sense to bring into these learning environments. And then we also have developer programs like Oculus Start and Oculus Launchpad. So for those who are a little bit further along, have these incredible ideas they want to bring to life, those are some great programs as well.
Fabulous. Thank you. I'm also going to post here Unity's Education Hub. For those of you in education or not-for-profit organizations, please look here for ways to get Unity for free for your computer labs at school, for your educators, for students, and you can also access a bunch of resources for teaching Unity in the classroom and getting some professional development training for educators. Monica, Yennie, thank you so much. We have some time now, a few minutes here to open things up to the audience for some Q&A. I'm going to scan the chat here for some questions, but I do have one to kick us off. What do you all look for in potential education partners? What makes a good partner?
So this actually came up in the chat earlier. I think AJ brought it up around when you're looking to introduce a new technology or a new program. Oftentimes the schools aren't interested in engaging until they've seen some use cases of it. And you can't really get those use cases until you start testing with the schools. So I thought that was such a great point. And the way that we've really been able to get around that conundrum is to specifically identify educators or school districts who are pretty aggressive in looking for new ways to support their students. An example is I had a superintendent from a desert community out in Southern California who reached out to me, had been doing reading and research, I think, on Niantic and AR and other things, and said, how can we use your technology to better support our students? And he actually asked if he could fly out to our office in San Francisco and meet with us, and was just super engaged. Those kinds of people are the perfect people to start with. And then you kind of, those are the early adopters, right? And then you use that to proliferate your programs. And that's really I think the best way that I have found to kick off new programs. So those are the types of people and organizations that we look for early on in a program. We are also heavily invested in diversity and inclusion. So we're specifically looking at the makeup of any given nonprofit, as well as the communities that they serve. And then we're looking at the ways in which they're engaging with youth and utilizing new types of educational tools and programming to give their students and program members a boost up.
Great. There's a follow-up question here from the audience, Yennie, and then Monica, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the ideal partnership as well. We have a question. Did Niantic develop Field Trip? If so, is that an arena which may be enhanced for schools with new tech?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Actually, Field Trip was our very first application. So Niantic started as what they call it a autonomous unit within Google in 2011. And that's where we launched Field Trip. It is near and dear to my heart. I loved Field Trip. It was amazing. It was basically an application that mimicked the experience that you would have if you explored a community with a friend who had lived there for a long time, and they kind of point out, oh, that home was home base for the Underground Railroad, and let's go to this coffee shop. They have a really unique latte. And so it was kind of immersive learning and exploration in local communities. It is absolutely something that we're looking at both in-house as well as with our developers who are on the Lightship platform. And that's what gets me super excited, is like, how can we further use AR kind of beyond the classic games that we see, which are hugely successful, but really just the tip of the iceberg when we think about how we can use AR to engage people in that way that Field Trip did. There's sound, there's visuals, there's sensory, and then there's just the broader human connection that I really love.
Thank you, Yennie. Monica, what do you look for in a potential partner?
Awesome. A lot of the same qualities. I think, it's sort of like we look for bravery. I know that sounds like a strange word, but it's people who are sort of willing to take this step where there is no current playbook ready for them to kind of follow. And so there is that special kind of partner or person who wants to see a couple steps ahead and figure out how to get there. I think we all have the same shared goals, but oftentimes um, people have a hard time seeing through how to break out of the older way of doing it. When we first started making VR experiences, a lot of people just wanted to put like a 2D screen in the headset. And there's no purpose in that, right? There's no value in just putting like that 2D screen in a headset. It's better just to watch it on your screen. And so people who are able to bend a little bit of that, the common way of thinking, coloring outside of the lines, and making sure that we are pushing the boundaries of the technology's capability, but also offering sort of this new way to transform learning that maybe we hadn't had before. And so I think it's understanding where that value is in the AR and VR space first, and making sure that those are the areas that we're really building out and finding partners who can help us grow in those spaces. Also, we are, a 13 and up company, so we typically think about what works in the informal learning space first, whether it's training, whether it's in museums, again, whether it's the empathy building, whether it's travel. And if we can really figure out all those key use cases, they do eventually start to come down and we're able to use them in more formalized institutions. And so as we're building out all these different pillars across learning, not just K-12, but informal learning, university learning, empathy building, training, and then of course development of creators and developers, there's so many areas that we still have to really start to bring together so we can create this entire ecosystem and kind of rise it all up at the same time. And I think that's where, a little bit like Yennie was saying, there's this chicken and egg situation still where we're looking for people who can help us build this whole foundation so that we eventually have a fully functioning opportunity for everyone to engage and find value in and build together. But we're still putting those little blocks together.
Yeah, I think one of the gold nuggets from what both of you are saying is good partners are those who can see the opportunity in the ambiguity. We're approaching these new emerging technologies, new ways to reach our communities and our students, and it's really about diving in and exploring and staying curious together as partners. Great. Got another question here. What's been surprising to you both as someone who works in the space of bridging technology and learning, or technology and community impact? Any surprises?
For me personally, and I brought it up a little bit earlier, is the biggest surprise in recent years is the impact of the pandemic. I mean, if that's not a good example of how quickly educational platforms and organizations can pivot, I don't know what is. It was really amazing to see some places really rally and find ways to work alongside for-profit companies to help fund the needs of the students. And it was also awesome to see a lot of individuals and corporations step up in a way that you maybe haven't before, and fund those needs. If we want to build a better world, we have to invest in these kids. We have to, and it's not even an option, right? And so it was really exciting for me to see how quickly folks could step up and pivot. And I think if we can make that a priority in the long term, we'll see and reap the benefits in the future.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it's been like the concept of time. I think when you're in it, like it feels so slow inside the company, right? And like we just want to build solutions really quickly. We all kind of know where we're going, and it feels like it takes forever until you look back and you're like, wait a minute, only 4 years ago, those were back when we had phones against our faces. And like I look at the way that the technology has evolved very quickly in a short amount of time. But when you're in trying to build these solutions and bring the value that we all know we want to bring to the external world, it always feels really slow. That compounded with what Yennie just talked about, how it took the education industry a really long time to want to embrace technology. but it also took the tech companies a long time to want to embrace education. Education doesn't work like other industries. It really is kind of its own being, and it has different solutions, it has different challenges. And so sometimes it can be challenging for a company that's not an ed tech company to fully embrace and understand those. And it takes a little while before they're ready to get into it. And I think the pandemic just finally built that bridge between the two, and is recognizing for both sides the value of coming together and solving for it.
Beautiful. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up our conversation here. Thank you both so very much, Yennie and Monica, for your time today, for the work that you do in support of education, and for sharing your perspectives. It's been a complete pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank
For
you for
those of
having
you who
us.
didn't get your questions answered, Yennie, Monica, myself, we're happy to answer through DM. So please ping us through this events platform. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.